The flashing red and blue lights in the rearview mirror usually meant a routine ticket and a long night of paperwork. On a desolate stretch of State Route 7 in Monroe County, Ohio, they meant something far darker. Two corrupt deputies thought they had found the perfect mark, a quiet black man driving alone through the dead of night. They planned to plant evidence, destroy his life, and pad their own pockets with the proceeds. They made one catastrophic mistake. The man they had just forced into handcuffs was not a helpless civilian. He was their ultimate superior. Rain fell in heavy, relentless sheets across the cracked asphalt, turning the empty highway into a slick, black mirror that reflected nothing but the storm. It was 2:07 a.m., the kind of hour when the only vehicles on the road belonged to long-haul truckers, third-shift factory workers, or people who preferred the cover of darkness for reasons they would never admit aloud. Parked in a gravel turnout near the county line, partially hidden behind a rusted billboard advertising a long-closed gas station, sat a Monroe County Sheriff's Department cruiser. Inside were Deputy Wade Harlan and his younger partner, Deputy Cody Finch. Harlan was a 15-year veteran whose moral compass had corroded beyond recognition years earlier. His heavy frame strained against the duty belt that dug into his midsection. He chewed a wooden toothpick with the slow, deliberate patience of a man who had long ago stopped pretending the job was about anything other than power. Beside him, Finch tapped restless fingers against the steering wheel. Only 2 years on the force, the younger man had already absorbed the real lessons of the 4th District under Harlan's guidance. The law in Monroe County was not something you enforced. It was something you bent, twisted, and sold to the highest bidder. Their precinct operated like a private cartel under the protection of Captain Leonard Graves. The system was simple and ruthlessly effective. Target out-of-towners, minorities, or anyone who looked like they lacked the money or connections for a competent lawyer. Fabricate probable cause. Conduct illegal searches. Seize cash and vehicles under the convenient banner of civil asset forfeiture. If a victim complained, it became their word against 2 badge-wearing officers. Conviction rates stayed high. Corruption stayed absolute. Dead night, Finch muttered, stifling a yawn and reaching for the lukewarm coffee in the cup holder. We haven't hit numbers this week, Wade. Graves is going to be breathing down our necks if we don't bring something in before the shift ends. Harlan spat the toothpick out the cracked window into the rain. Patience, kid. The night always provides. You're looking for speeders. I'm looking for prey. A few miles down the highway, a dark blue 2018 Ford Taurus rolled steadily at exactly 55 miles per hour. Behind the wheel sat Elias Kane. At 48, his face carried the hard lines of a man who had spent a lifetime climbing against the current. He wore a simple gray Henley and dark jeans, the ordinary uniform of an exhausted middle manager making a long, late-night drive home. Elias Kane was no middle manager. Exactly 3 weeks earlier, the governor had appointed him director of the Ohio State Highway Patrol and Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The appointment had been a political earthquake. Kane was an outsider, a former federal investigator with a reputation for dismantling organized crime networks and corrupt public officials without mercy or favoritism. The governor had given him a single mandate: clean house. The state police and the county sheriff's departments had become a tangled web of nepotism, bribery, and systematic civil rights abuse. Monroe County's 4th District sat at the top of Kane's list. Rather than announce his arrival with press conferences and internal affairs task forces, Kane had chosen a different approach. He wanted to see the rot with his own eyes. For 3 consecutive nights, he had driven unmarked civilian vehicles through the state's most notorious jurisdictions, waiting to learn what happened to an average black man traveling alone in the early hours of the morning. As the Taurus approached the rusted billboard, Kane's sharp eyes caught the faint reflective glint of a cruiser's decal hidden in the shadows. He did not touch the brakes. He held his speed with mechanical precision, hands locked at 10 and 2. Inside the patrol car, Harlan sat up straight, predatory instinct flaring. "Look at this one," he sneered, jabbing a thick finger toward the passing Ford. "Driving a little too perfect, don't you think? Hands glued to the wheel, not a mile over the limit. Nervous. Plates are clean," Finch reported, running the tag through the mobile data terminal. "Registered to an E. Kane out of Columbus. No warrants. Clean record." "Clean record just means he hasn't been caught yet," Harlan said, a cruel smile stretching across his face. "Out-of-town plates, middle of nowhere. That's our guy. Lights, Cody. Let's go hunting." Finch flipped the switch. The light bar erupted into a blinding strobe of red and blue that tore through the rainy darkness. The cruiser's engine roared as it surged out of the gravel and closed the distance in seconds. Kane watched the lights fill his rearview mirror. A deep, steadying breath filled his lungs. Cold, calculated calm settled over him. He reached up and pressed a small, disguised button on the mirror, activating a high-definition dash camera hardwired to a secure, encrypted cloud server monitored by his trusted inner circle at the bureau. A second sequence on his smartwatch activated a hidden microphone woven into the collar of his shirt. "Let's see just how deep this goes," he thought. He signaled right and guided the Taurus smoothly onto the muddy shoulder, shifting into park. He rolled down the window and placed both hands squarely on the top of the steering wheel where they were clearly visible. He waited. Heavy boots crunched against wet gravel as Deputy Wade Harlan approached with deliberate slowness. The beam of a high-powered tactical flashlight stabbed through the driver's window, aimed deliberately at Kane's eye level, a classic intimidation tactic designed to disorient and establish dominance from the first second. "You know why I pulled you over tonight, boy?" Harlan's voice was a low, gravelly rasp, thick with condescension. The word boy hung in the damp air like a calculated insult meant to provoke. Kane blinked against the harsh light, but did not shift his posture. His voice emerged calm, resonant, and completely free of the fear Harlan was accustomed to hearing. "I'm afraid I don't, Deputy. I was maintaining the speed limit and staying within my lane." "You were drifting," Harlan lied without hesitation. "Crossed the yellow line back by the mile marker. Plus, that window tint looks illegal. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Now." Kane moved his right hand slowly toward his back pocket. "I am reaching for my wallet, Deputy. My license is inside." "Move slow," Harlan snapped, resting a hand on the butt of his sidearm. On the passenger side, Finch approached with his own flashlight, sweeping the back seat and floorboards for any excuse to escalate. Kane produced a standard Ohio driver's license and deliberately left the gold director's badge and state credentials buried deep in the leather folds of the wallet. Flashing the badge now would end the stop instantly. He needed them to reveal themselves completely. Harlan snatched the card and shone his light across it. "Elias Kane, Columbus. What brings you out to Monroe County at 2 a.m? Looking to score?" "I was just out for a drive," Kane answered evenly. "Clearing my head. Is it a crime to use a public highway, Deputy?" Harlan leaned in until the smell of stale tobacco and bitter coffee filled the car. "Don't get smart with me. People from the capital don't take 2-hour midnight drives into Monroe County unless they're running something. Step out of the vehicle." "For a traffic violation?" Kane asked, testing the boundary just enough. "Under the law, you have the authority to order me out, but I'd like to know whether I am being detained or if I am free to go." Harlan's eyes narrowed. Citizens who knew their rights offended him on a visceral level. "Oh, we got ourselves a roadside lawyer here, Cody," he shouted over the roof of the car. "Listen carefully. You are going to unbuckle that seatbelt and step out of this car, or I am going to drag you out through this window and charge you with resisting. Do you understand me?" "I will comply with your order," Kane said, voice deliberately flat. He unbuckled, pushed the door open, and stepped into the freezing rain at his full 6'2" height, forcing Harlan to take a half step back. "Turn around, hands on the roof," Kane complied. Without warning, Harlan kicked his legs apart violently and began a rough, invasive pat-down, slamming a forearm into Kane's back and pressing him hard against the wet metal. Weapons? Needles? Anything that's gonna stick me? He emptied Kane's pockets, tossed the wallet onto the trunk, and shoved the cell phone into his own jacket. I am unarmed, Kane said quietly, and I do not consent to any search of my person or my vehicle. I don't care what you consent to. Harlan looked over the roof. Cody, I thought I smelled marijuana when he rolled the window down. You smell it? Finch hesitated only a fraction of a second before falling into the practice script. Yes, sir. Overpowering odor of unburnt marijuana coming from the cabin. Well, look at that, Harlan said mockingly. Probable cause. Toss the car. Kane watched in the reflection of the wet glass as Finch tore through the interior. Glove box emptied onto the floorboards. Center console ripped open. Seats lifted. 3 minutes later, Finch emerged, holding a small, clear plastic baggie containing a white crystalline substance. Look what I found tucked under the driver's seat, Wade. Crystal meth. Harlan's dark chuckle was pure venom. He wrenched Kane's arms behind his back. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit ruthlessly into flesh as Harlan ratcheted them down as tightly as the mechanism allowed, deliberately cutting off circulation. Well, Mr. Roadside Lawyer, Harlan whispered into Kane's ear. Looks like you're going away for a long time. Possession of a Schedule II narcotic with intent to distribute. That's a felony. That isn't mine, Kane said, voice still carrying absolute authority despite his position. You planted it. Prove it, Harlan laughed, shoving him toward the cruiser. My partner and I are sworn officers of the law. You're just another thug from the city. Who do you think the judge is going to believe? Kane offered no resistance as Harlan forced his head down and pushed him into the cramped, hard plastic rear seat. The heavy metal door slammed shut, sealing him in darkness. Inside the cage, the rain hammered the roof. Kane's wrists burned, but a fierce, triumphant fire burned hotter in his chest. You just signed your own arrest warrants, he thought. Every single one of you. The cruiser smelled of stale sweat, industrial cleaner, and cheap pine air freshener fighting a losing battle against the memory of previous arrests. Kane sat motionless, focusing past the pain, concentrating on the tiny microphone in his collar and praying it captured every word spoken in the front seat. Harlan and Finch climbed in, bringing the damp smell of rain-soaked wool with them. Harlan tossed Kane's wallet and phone onto the dashboard without bothering to examine the contents. In his mind, the man in the back was already a statistic, a nobody waiting to be processed. The cruiser's tires spun briefly in the gravel before finding asphalt. Man, that was too easy, Harlan chuckled, adjusting the rearview mirror so he could lock eyes with Kane. You capital city boys come out here thinking you own the world. Let me tell you something, Kane. Out here in Monroe County, I am God. What I say goes. Finch laughed nervously and tossed the baggie of planted meth onto the center console. Think Graves will authorize a civil asset seizure on the Taurus? Nice car. Might fetch a few grand at the county auction. Absolutely, Harlan said. Vehicle used in the transport and distribution of narcotics. Belongs to the department now. We'll split the cash bonus. Might finally get that base boat I've been looking at. Kane let their words wash over him, memorizing every confession. Under federal law, conspiracy to deprive a person of civil rights under color of law carried decades in prison. You officers seem remarkably comfortable discussing fabricated evidence, Kane said, voice calm and articulate, completely devoid of panic. Harlan scowled into the mirror. Shut your mouth, crackhead. You don't have a say in this anymore. I'm just curious, Kane continued, tone conversational but edged with lethal precision. How many innocent people have you framed to meet your quotas? How many lives have you ruined for a bonus on a paycheck? Finch twisted in his seat. You need to learn when to shut up, buddy. You're already looking at 5 to 10. Don't make it worse. I think you boys have made it as bad as it can possibly get, Kane replied, coldly. But not for me. Have you ever heard the word hubris, Deputy Harlan? It's what happens when arrogance becomes a man's downfall. Harlan slammed the brakes in the middle of the empty highway. The cruiser skidded on the wet asphalt, throwing Kane hard against the metal cage. Harlan threw the transmission into park and spun around, face purple with rage. "Listen to me, you piece of garbage," he spat, spittle striking the plexiglass. "You think you're smart? You think anyone is going to care what a convicted drug dealer has to say? When we get to the 4th precinct, I'm going to put you in an unmonitored holding cell. We're going to have a little conversation. By the time the sun comes up, you'll either sign a full confession or you'll leave that station in an ambulance. Do we understand each other?" Kane's dark eyes remained unblinking, reflecting the green glow of the dashboard. "I understand perfectly, Deputy Harlan. I understand exactly how your precinct operates." The rest of the drive passed in hostile silence. 20 minutes later, the cruiser turned off the main highway onto a poorly lit industrial road on the outskirts of Woodsfield. At the end of the road, looming like a concrete bunker against the rainy night, stood the Monroe County 4th Precinct, a brutalist block of gray stone ringed by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Few windows, several cruisers parked haphazardly, 3 deputies smoking under the rear awning. "Home sweet home," Harlan mocked as he pulled into the sally port and killed the engine. He hauled Kane out by the collar, offering no support as the cuffed man stumbled. "Walk!" One of the smokers, a tall, bald deputy named Vince Brody, flicked his cigarette away. "What you got there, Wade?" "Another city boy pushing crystal on our roads," Harlan announced proudly. "Found a bag under the seat. He's got a bit of an attitude problem, though." Brody laughed and held the steel door. "Interrogation room B. Camera's been down all week. Take your time." They pushed Kane through the flickering fluorescent glare of the precinct. The air smelled of cheap floor wax and old sweat. As they marched him down the long linoleum hallway, Kane cataloged every detail. Officers sleeping at desks, civilian clerks looking the other way, the complete absence of protocol. A department that had surrendered entirely to rot. Behind the high wooden booking desk sat Desk Sergeant Clyde Barnett, a bored man reading a sports magazine. "Got a booking for you, Clyde," Harlan said, shoving Kane against the counter. "Felony possession, holding cell 4 while we write it up." Barnett sighed without looking up. "Name?" "Elias Kane." Harlan pulled the wallet from Finch's pocket and tossed it onto the desk with a heavy thud. Barnett finally set the magazine aside and flipped the wallet open. The bored expression vanished. Color drained from his face until he looked the color of old ash. He was not looking at the driver's license. His eyes were locked on the solid gold 7-point star badge and the holographic identification card beneath it. Elias Kane, Director, Ohio State Highway Patrol Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Barnett's jaw worked silently. His finger trembled as he pointed at the open wallet. "Wade," his voice cracked into a high-pitched squeak. "Look at the badge." The silence in the booking area became absolute. Only the irregular hum of the fluorescent lights remained. Harlan frowned and leaned over. "What the hell is your problem, Clyde? It's just an ID, book the man." Then his eyes found the badge. The color left his face so fast he looked ready to collapse. He stared at the gold star, then slowly, mechanically, turned his head toward the quiet black man standing calmly in the center of the lobby. Elias Kane was not looking at the floor. His chin was high, shoulders square, eyes locked on Harlan with the cold, immovable weight of absolute authority. "This," Harlan's voice was barely a whisper, "this is a fake. This is a joke." Finch stepped forward, peered over Harlan's shoulder, and felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the edge of the desk to stay upright. "Wade, look at the seal. It's got the governor's biometric watermark. You can't fake that." "I said it's a fake," Harlan roared, hand dropping instinctively to his weapon, the panicked reaction of a cornered animal. If this was real, everything ended. Pension, freedom, life. "There is a QR code on the back of the credential card, Deputy Finch," Kane said, voice ringing through the lobby with a resonance that demanded obedience. Take out your department-issued phone, scan it. It links directly to the secure encrypted database in Columbus. Finch's hands shook so violently he dropped the phone. He scrambled to recover it, opened the scanner, and held it over the card. A quiet beep. The official state portal loaded. A high-resolution photograph of Elias Kane appeared, flanked by green verification marks. Beneath the photo, a red banner flashed. Clearance level. Absolute do not detain. Oh my God, Finch gasped, tears welling. He backed away as if Kane were radioactive. Oh my God, Wade, it's him. It's really him. We just arrested the director of the state police. Shut up, Cody, Harlan shouted, drawing the weapon halfway from its holster. He's a Fed impersonator. He set us up. We take him out back right now. We say he went for a gun. We wipe the dash cam. The absolute insanity of the words hung in the air. Deputy Vince Brody stepped into the lobby and froze, hands rising. Whoa, Wade, have you lost your mind? Put the gun down. Kane did not flinch. He never broke eye contact. Draw that weapon, Harlan, and you make the worst decision of your miserable life. Pull that trigger, and you will not simply face federal prison. You will be hunted by every law enforcement agency in this country. The heavy reinforced doors to the administrative wing slammed open. Captain Leonard Graves stepped into the light. Meticulously groomed, silver eagles on his collar, the calculating mastermind who had spent 2 decades turning a public office into a private syndicate. What in God's name is going on out here? He barked, eyes darting from Harlan's half-drawn weapon to the cuffed man in the center of the room. Harlan, secure that weapon right now, or I'll have your badge. Harlan shoved the gun back into the holster, chest heaving. Captain, this guy, he had meth in the car, I swear, but he's carrying fake federal ID. He's trying to set us up. Graves marched to the booking desk and looked down at the wallet. He was an intelligent man who monitored state politics the way a predator watches weather patterns. He had read the confidential briefings about the new director. As his eyes moved from the photograph to Kane's face, the arrogant scowl melted into pure, unadulterated horror. Director Kane, the words tasted like ash. Graves was a survivor. Damage control was instinct. He spun on his officers with theatrical outrage. Get those cuffs off him, right now, you incompetent fools. Harlan fumbled for the keys, hands rattling. Stop, Kane commanded. Harlan froze. Do not touch me, Deputy Harlan. Kane turned his full attention to the captain. Leave the handcuffs on. When the federal prosecutors photograph the deep tissue bruising on my wrists, I want them to see exactly how tightly your men apply restraints to compliant citizens. Graves swallowed hard. Director Kane, please. This is a colossal misunderstanding. Harlan is a rogue element. If he planted evidence, he will be fired and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Kane let out a low, humorless laugh. Do not insult my intelligence, Captain Graves. A rogue element? I have spent the last 6 months investigating your precinct's financials. I know about the civil asset forfeitures. I know about the undocumented cash seizures funneled through the Woodsfield municipal shell accounts. Harlan and Finch were not acting alone. They were executing a well-rehearsed systemic protocol, one that you designed. Finch let out a loud sob and buried his face in his hands. I told you, Wade. I told you we shouldn't have pulled him over. Shut up, Harlan yelled, lunging for the baggie of meth on the desk. This is his. He had it in the car. Put it down, Harlan, Graves screamed, realizing every second of panic was digging their graves deeper. He turned back to Kane, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial professional tone. Director, let's go to my office. Get those cuffs off and discuss how we can handle this quietly. There's no need to burn down the entire department. We can come to an arrangement. An arrangement? Kane's eyes narrowed into dark slits. Let me explain the arrangement you currently have, Leonard. Over the last 45 minutes, your men have committed kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault under color of law, and conspiracy to fabricate evidence, violations of 18 U.S.C. sections 241 and 242. Those are federal crimes. Graves's jaw tightened. The diplomatic mask cracked, revealing the cornered criminal beneath. You came into my jurisdiction under false pretenses. It's entrapment. It won't hold up. Your word against 3 sworn officers. My word, Kane smiled, a terrifying, victorious expression. Do you honestly believe a man with my background walks into a snake pit without wearing boots? He turned his head slightly, nodding toward his right shoulder. Underneath the collar of this shirt is a microtransmitter. It is not merely recording our conversation, Captain. It is transmitting a live encrypted audio feed directly to the FBI Public Corruption Unit in Columbus. Special Agent Derek Sloan has been listening to every single word Deputy Harlan said in that cruiser, and every word you are saying right now. Graves took a step backward, as if physically struck. And that is not all, Kane continued relentlessly. The dash camera in my vehicle is hardwired to the State Attorney General's cloud server. We watched Deputy Finch search my empty car. We watched him miraculously produce a bag of methamphetamine that he pulled from his own tactical vest. By now, federal warrants have already been signed by Judge Eleanor Davies. It is over, Leonard. The game is entirely over. The silence that followed was absolute. Harlan dropped the baggie. White crystals scattered across the waxed linoleum. Finch slid down the wall, knees pulled to his chest, weeping openly. Sergeant Barnett stood with both hands on his head, staring blankly at nothing. Then every landline in the building began to scream simultaneously. A young dispatcher burst from the radio room, headset in hand, panic in her eyes. Captain, the state police just took over our radio frequencies. They're ordering us to stand down. Before Graves could respond, a low mechanical rumble vibrated through the floorboards, the heavy rhythmic thrum of massive diesel engines. Red and blue strobes exploded through the small frosted windows, painting the lobby in chaotic rotating shadows. Screeching tires, heavy boots hitting wet pavement. A voice amplified by a high-powered tactical megaphone shook the reinforced glass. Monroe County Sheriff's Department. This is the Ohio State Highway Patrol Special Response Team. You are surrounded. Step away from your weapons. Unlock the front doors and exit with your hands in the air. Kane stood tall in his handcuffs, watching the empire of dirt collapse around Captain Leonard Graves. I suggest you open the door, Leonard. They are not going to ask twice. The booming voice reverberated through the concrete walls. Outside, the idling of armored Bearcat vehicles created a low, terrifying earthquake. Captain Graves stood paralyzed. For 20 years he had ruled this precinct like a medieval warlord. Now the walls were closing in, and the drawbridge was on fire. Open the door, Leonard, Kane repeated, the only calm voice in the room. Despite the steel still biting into his wrists, he radiated absolute control. If they have to breach, they are coming through with flashbangs and rifles. Do not let your men die for your greed. Deputy Vince Brody did not wait for an order. Panic overrode loyalty. He threw his hands high and sprinted for the heavy steel doors. Don't shoot! We're opening up! We're surrendering! He fumbled the deadbolts, threw the doors wide, and dropped flat onto the wet concrete, fingers laced behind his head. Through the open doorway, the full scale of Graves's nightmare materialized. More than 36 Special Response Team operators stood in a tightly coordinated perimeter, assault rifles raised, laser sights cutting through the misty rain. Behind them, federal agents and FBI windbreakers were already establishing a mobile command post from the rear of a black SUV. Hands! Let me see your hands! Step away from the weapons! The lead tactical commander, ballistic helmet stenciled Hail, shouted. Operators flooded the lobby with terrifying speed and precision. Sergeant Barnett dropped to his knees, sobbing as zip ties cinched around his wrists. Deputy Wade Harlan, mind completely fractured by the scale of the raid, let out a primal yell and reached for his holster in a final suicidal act of defiance. Before his fingers could touch the grip, an operator drove the heavy stock of a rifle into his chest, sending the large man crashing into a row of plastic waiting chairs. 3 operators piled on, pinning him, disarming him, ratcheting heavy flex cuffs around his wrists. Harlan thrashed like a wild animal until a knee pressed firmly between his shoulder blades. Commander Grant Hale bypassed the chaos and walked straight to the center of the lobby. He holstered his sidearm and produced a universal handcuff key. "Director Kane," he said, voice clipped and professional. "Are you injured, sir?" "Just my pride, Commander." Kane turned so the cuffs could be removed. The heavy steel ratchets clicked open. He brought his arms forward and winced as circulation returned in a painful rush of pins and needles. He ignored it. "Medical is standing by outside. No time." Kane rolled his shoulders and locked eyes with Graves, now surrounded by 3 heavily armed troopers. The captain's tailored uniform was rumpled, his arrogant posture shattered. "Wait!" Finch suddenly shrieked from the floor. The young deputy was hyperventilating, eyes darting frantically. He pointed a shaking finger at Graves. "Stop him! He has a kill switch! His phone!" Graves's eyes widened in pure panic. His right hand had been slowly sliding toward a specialized encrypted phone in his trouser pocket, the device that controlled the precinct's offshore shell accounts and the local servers holding decades of illegal ledgers. One button would magnetically wipe everything. Finch, desperate to save his own skin, lunged. Before the operators could react, he tackled his own captain, both men crashing into the booking desk. "He's wiping the servers!" Finch screamed, grappling for the phone. "I'll testify. I'll tell you everything. The cash houses, the fake warrants, the judge he pays off. I'll give you all of it. Just give me a deal." An operator yanked Finch off and tossed him aside. Commander Hale pinned Graves's wrist and pried the black smartphone free before the captain could unlock the screen. Kane walked slowly to where Graves lay pinned on the linoleum. He looked down at the disgraced captain, then shifted his gaze to Finch, weeping and begging for a plea deal on the floor. "There is no honor among thieves, Leonard," Kane said softly. "The moment the ship takes on water, the rats will drown each other to reach the top of the mast. You built a precinct entirely on greed and fear. Did you really believe loyalty would survive tonight?" Graves glared up, face twisted in bitter hatred. "You think you've won, Kane? You think this ends with me? The system is too deep. You don't even know whose toes you're stepping on." "Oh, I have a fairly good idea," Kane replied, signaling for the FBI agents to enter. Special Agent Derek Sloan, a tall man with silver hair and sharp analytical eyes, walked through the doors carrying a reinforced evidence box. "Director," he nodded respectfully, "warrants for the entire building have been executed. My teams are moving on the evidence locker and the captain's administrative wing now." "Tear it down to the studs, Derek," Kane ordered. "I want the floorboards pulled up. I want the ceiling tiles checked. Every case file, every logbook, every dash cam hard drive. This precinct ceases to exist as of this moment." Over the next 3 hours, the depth of the 4th District's rot was dragged into the harsh light. Behind a false wall in the evidence room, agents discovered more than $2 million in shrink-wrapped cash, stacked beside stolen firearms and kilos of narcotics that had supposedly been destroyed years earlier. The most damning discovery came from a hollowed-out ventilation duct in Graves's private office. A physical, handwritten ledger. It was not merely a list of highway victims. It was a master payroll of corruption. Kane sat at the mahogany desk, carefully turning the leather-bound pages while Agent Sloan read over his shoulder. The names were explosive. Local magistrates who signed blank search warrants for a cut of seized assets. Municipal zoning officials who used the police to intimidate business owners into selling land for pennies. And then Kane stopped on a page dated 3 months earlier. He traced a single name underlined in red ink. State Senator Grant Whitmore, $50,000, campaign contribution, via Shell Corporation. Sloan let out a low whistle. Senator Whitmore, chairman of the State Police Oversight Committee, the man who fought your appointment the hardest. Kane closed the ledger. A cold, dangerous fire burned in his eyes. Graves was right about one thing. The system is deep. He was only the attack dog for the real predators. And now we have their leash. By 6 a.m. the rain had finally stopped, giving way to a pale, bruised dawn over Monroe County. But the darkness that had blanketed the 4th Precinct for so long was permanently shattered by the glaring lights of media satellite trucks. Kane had not kept the raid secret. Sunlight was the best disinfectant, and he wanted the entire state to watch the fortress fall. His press office had tipped the major networks an hour before sunrise. A massive crowd of reporters, cameramen, and shocked local residents stood behind yellow police tape, watching an unprecedented spectacle. One by one, the corrupt officers of the Monroe County 4th District were marched out in handcuffs. Deputy Wade Harlan was first. Exhausted, broken, the arrogance of only a few hours earlier completely gone. As he was led toward a federal transport van, the crowd erupted. Residents who had been terrorized, harassed, and robbed by Harlan over the years shouted his name, demanding justice. He kept his head down. Next came Deputy Cody Finch, practically dragged, sobbing loudly, a stark reminder of the cowardice that always underpins abuse of power. His desperate attempts at a plea deal had bought him nothing yet. He was going to a federal holding cell with the rest. Finally, Captain Leonard Graves emerged. He walked stiffly, jaw clenched, trying desperately to preserve a shred of dignity. The cameras flashed violently in his face. The reality settled in. He was a disgraced, indicted felon staring down the barrel of a life sentence in federal prison. Elias Kane stood under the concrete awning of the precinct, arms crossed, watching the transport vans load. Agent Sloan stood beside him, holding the sealed evidence box containing the ledger. Graves stopped at the door of the van and looked back. The distance between them was only 30 feet, yet it was an unbridgeable chasm between justice and corruption. Graves stared, a silent promise of vengeance in his eyes. Kane did not break the gaze. He simply gave a slow, deliberate nod, an acknowledgement of the war that had just begun. "He's going to turn state's evidence before the end of the week," Sloan murmured as the van doors slammed. "When he realizes Senator Whitmore isn't going to protect him, he'll sing like a bird to stay out of maximum security." "Let him sing," Kane replied, voice rough with exhaustion but laced with unyielding resolve. "We'll use his testimony to arrest Whitmore, and when we have Whitmore, we'll see who he gives up. We are going to pull this weed out by the absolute bottom of the root, Derek. It's going to be a bloodbath in the state capitol, Elias. You're declaring war on the political establishment." Kane turned away from the media circus and looked toward the rising sun. Golden light caught the edge of the gold badge now proudly pinned to his belt. "They declared war on the people a long time ago," he said softly. "I'm just the man who finally shot back." The fall of the Monroe County 4th Precinct sent a shockwave across the country. The dashcam footage of Kane's arrest, coupled with the audio recordings of Harlan and Finch plotting to plant the crystal meth, was leaked to the press by the end of the week. The footage went viral, dominating national news cycles and sparking widespread investigations into civil asset forfeiture laws and police corruption. Finch, terrified of prison, fully cooperated with federal prosecutors. His testimony corroborated every piece of physical evidence recovered from the precinct. Deputy Wade Harlan was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and racketeering. Captain Leonard Graves attempted to fight the charges, leaning on political connections, but the ledger was undeniable. When Senator Grant Whitmore was publicly arrested at a charity gala 3 weeks later, Graves realized he was entirely alone. He pleaded guilty and received 30 years without the possibility of parole. As for Elias Kane, he held no victory parade. He went on no press tour. The morning after the raid, at exactly 8 a.m., he walked into his office at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation in Columbus, poured himself a black coffee, and opened the next file on his desk. The 4th precinct was gone, but the rot was everywhere, and the new director had only just begun to clean house.